Hi everyone. So in this video, we're going to look at variables in PowerShell. We will go through user-defined variables, automatic variables in PowerShell. Then we are going to look at different data types and how data types are assigned in PowerShell. Then we'll move on to objects. And after that, we'll see data structures. We'll cover 3 data structures: arrays, array list, and hash tables. How do we initialize them and how do we use them? And at last, we will just touch upon creating your custom objects. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so we'll start first with the variables. What are user-defined variables? You can define a variable using the dollar symbol in front and then just the variable name. One thing to note here is you cannot just declare a variable. PowerShell requires you to assign the variable at the time of declaration. So if you just declare like this without assigning, let me just load this, and then if you try to reference it, so it doesn't give an error because we have not set the property. So let's do that. So we need to use the set strict mode version. If you run this command, then it's going to give you an error or specify the error, right? So now if you just run color again, you get the errors. So main thing to note here is PowerShell requires you to assign the variable or initialize variable at the time of declaring it. So when we run this, and now if you want to run, now you get the result. So this is very simple. How do you declare a variable? And you have another option to set the variable using this lengthy command. So, but however, this is more widely used because it is easier. Here also you just specify the name tag and value to initialize a variable. So let me just quickly run this. So now the color should be green, right? Okay, so this is user-defined variable, pretty simple. Let's move on to automatic variables. So there are certain variables that are available by default in PowerShell. So these are, for example, null variable, last exit code. These are some of the variables that are available. And last exit code just specifies whether the last command that was used was successful or it was a failure. So for example, if you want to just ping a website, like now you see the ping returning results, right? So if I cancel out of this, so there were received packets. So now if I run just this last exit code, so it returns a code of 0. That means the last command was successful. If for some reason last command was unsuccessful, if it has thrown an error, so it would be giving you 1. Okay, moving on to the next one. So we have certain preference variables also in PowerShell. These are the error warnings, verbose, debug. So this is certain things that will allow you to add additional functionality to your scripts, right? So you can also try to run this command to see what are the available preference variables. So you have all these types of preference variable. Let's take an example of let's see error action preference, right? So here I'm declaring a variable without assigning a value, right? So when I run this, I get an error. Suppose I don't want an error to be displayed. So what I can do is I can assign this variable to silently continue. So if I run this, and now if I run again this command, it's not going to give me any error, right? So it's just, there is an error, but it will not display. Before we move on, let's again change it back to continue. And if I run again this, I should get the error, right? Let's move on to data types. So data types, there are all different data types supported: booleans, integers, floating points, strings. These are some of the common ones. And of course, there are other. PowerShell automatically identifies based on the value that is stored what's the data type, and you can assign the variable to different data types, right? So you can assign it to 1 as an integer. this will be a string and this will be a boolean. So it doesn't throw any error. And to get the data type, right, you can do this. So now it is boolean, right? So it should, and we can say get type. And you can say name. And if you run this, so boolean, because last that we used was boolean. So that's how you get the type of the variable. Here is an example of floating. So here we have number 1, but this is integer. You will get int 32 as a type. And once you assign a decimal value, you should get a double. So floating points are stored as double. So, and then you have strings. Again, basic strings, you assign it in single quotes like this. Here I'm going to print this statement, color of the item is, and the color variable. So it's going to give 3 here. Let me just run this. And if I try to print the statement, it gives green. One thing to note here is whether to assign single quote or double quote to a variable, right? So keep this in mind. This is important for variable expansion. So you should use, if you intend to use a variable inside your statement or inside the string literal. So in that case, you should use double quote. So here, if I run this, what happens is it just prints color. It's not going to actually expand it and use the variable color. Okay, so now let's look at objects. How do we create objects? So we have learned how to create variables, regular variables, user-defined variables, and also how to use the automatic variables, preference variables. Then we looked at different types of data types available. And now let's see what are objects, right, in PowerShell. So every variable that you assign or you initially create is actually an object under the hood, right? So you can actually, like we used color object, which color variable that we assigned, right? So that's also an object. So if I run this command to see what are the properties available for that variable, and you can see it's a length property available, and then you can see all the properties available for that particular variable or object. So these are all so since I think the data type is string for color, the last that we assigned is as green. So these are all the methods available for this object. So everything is a type of object, and then you can use get member and specify the input object or your variable name to see what are the methods available. Now let's look at the data structures, right? What are different types of data structure, how they are assigned. So let's start with arrays. So this is the syntax used to create an array. So we have the variable name or array name, and then we have the @ symbol, and under the brackets different items, and each items is index based starting from 0. So if I load this, and then you get all these 4 index based items, you can get the first item, which is the second from here, and then you can similarly get the third or fourth item here. Now to add a new item to array, there are a few ways you can do that. You can either just you can use the same variable plus you can add the new item. Then it's going to add yellow also appended at the bottom. There's another way you can use the plus equal like this, and then you can add. And then if there are multiple items, you can use plus equals, and again use @ and how you initialize array. You can use the same thing, and you can add multiple items. Moving on to array list. Again, very similar to arrays, but we use cast to system collections array list, and then everything stays as is. Now this is an array list, And one of the advantage of array list is you can then use these methods that are available to you to simply add or remove items from array list. So now this item is added, and then if you just select, you see gray is added, and then you can remove gray and again try to print. Now gray is removed. So there are many functions, right, for array list that you can use. It just improves a better way to store collection of items, right? Now third thing is hash table. So hash table actually provides key value pair data structure. So here I have the products hash table where we have the company and their phones, and this is the key and this is key value pair. Again, very similar to how you declare an array or array list. However, thing to note is after the @ symbol, it's the curly braces and not the regular brackets. And then you use key and value. One thing to also note, normally in JSON format or also in, I think, TypeScript, you use colon separator between key and value. However, in this case here you use equal to, and then you don't have the commas after each value. So you just go to the next line and then give the next value. Let me load this. And then you can just use as is, and it gives you the name and value pairs. So you can specify the key, products key Google, and it returns the pixel. Then you can get all the keys in your hash tables. You can get all the values in the hash table. And then you can add also using the add method and pass the name and value. So like this. And then we can again see the keys. So we have 1+ also added, and then you can also run contains keys. There are multiple methods available for you to operate on a hash table. Now let's look at custom objects. How do we create? Again, very simple. We assign the variable names and we cast it to PS custom object. Any user defined object in PowerShell is of type PS custom object, and hence we create using the same syntax for hash table. So we have a key value pair, cast it to PS custom object. So if I load this, now I can assign it or access any keys or variables in that object. So here my object display, this is 4K. So this is how you create custom objects. All right, that's all for this session. Hope this was useful. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.